world's changing. And you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.
With no audience, no fans in attendance, you are afforded an opportunity to hear every single shot.
Have you thought about that? What's it going to be like fighting and no fans in the stands?
It's going to be a little weird, bro, to be honest, because I'm the type of fighter that feeds off the energy of the fans. I'll probably be a little bit more disciplined. I want to give a great show to the fans at home. I want to be that first big fight. At the end of the day, I feel like the safety of the people is what matters the most.
Romer Angulo, what kind of fight should we expect when you two step into the ring?
It's going to be a war, man. He's a hard puncher. Most of my fights are nothing but knockouts, too. If you hit me once, I have to hit you back twice. You know how people got with Mike Tyson. They couldn't wait to go see him. That's kind of like the route I want to take. The generation before us was Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. I want to be one of the greatest in my generation. If you mention boxing from the 2020s and up, David Benavidez has to be up there.
For the second time this month, Showtime Championship Boxing is back, ladies and gentlemen. Back at the Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut, with a triple header for you tomorrow night exclusively on Showtime. Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas, the gentleman on the other side of the screen. You know him from CBS Sports. He is Brian Campbell. We are the hosts of Morning Kombat, and we are here to take you through today's weigh-ins for the Benavidez and Angulo card. Brian, we have a bit of a triple header in store for the fans tomorrow. We've got David Benavidez putting his super middleweight WBC title up for grabs against Alexis Angulo, a heavyweight contest between Otto Wallin and Travis Kaufman, and then I want to make sure I get this right, a interim WBA vacant lightweight title opportunity for Rolando Romero and Jackson Marinez. It is quite a lot in store tomorrow.
Yeah, full mixed bag across the board of interesting matchups, good stories heading into here. And look, if that first Showtime Championship Boxing card that kicked us off post-quarantine was any indication, you should expect fireworks, especially when fighters like David Benavidez are filling the card. Luke, just 23 years old, regained his WBC title last year against Anthony Durrell, who had been a stalwart in this division, and did it by stoppage. There's a short list of fighters in this game who, when they're on TV, you tune in no matter what. Benavidez does that. He's tall for the division at super middleweight, and he lets his hands go. And when you talk about the guy standing across from him, an all-action competitor in Angulo, should be a good time.
Now, if you would like to watch this fight and you don't already have Showtime, I have good news for you. You can go to Showtime.com right now and try a 30-day free trial. If you like it, you can keep it. If not, you can go. I don't know why you would make that choice, but it will be available to you. Go to Showtime.com right now. BC, let's start, if we can, with this main event. The WBC super middleweight title up for grabs. David Benavidez, as you mentioned, 23 years old, taking on Alexis Angulo. Let's talk first, though, about Benavidez. Let me start with a question for you. If you had to make a list of the top 5 most exciting, maybe best, something like that, boxers under 25, Benavidez has to make that list, right?
Well, he not only has to make it, Luke, he's competing for the top spot. And if you aren't woke to what David Benavidez brings to the table, he's the younger brother of welterweight title contender Jose Benavidez Jr. But go back to 2017, a big fight for him against a rugged fighter in Porky Medina. He had a 7-punch combination knockout that was in contention for best KO of the year. And all we have seen since then for Benavidez was setting the super middleweight record for becoming the youngest fighter to win a title at just 20 years old. He's big, as I mentioned. He lets his hands go. The folks at CompuBox will let you know he attempts 69 punches per round, which is well above the super middleweight limit. And his opponent's attempt just shy of 68. So he gets in there, he gets dirty, he makes fun fights happen. And Luke, this may be a guy who's just 23. I mean, where were you when you were just 23, not fighting for world titles? But he turned pro at age 16 in Mexico. He's a veteran who's been around for a while, and he is improving very quickly.
Yeah, and you mentioned something which I think is kind of important. He is an all-action fighter while being slick, right? He can work behind the jab if he needs to. He is brilliant with the body work, especially from the left side. He can double up from there. He pressures opponents backwards. So he has kind of like this mixture of styles to a degree where he is smart. Sometimes he takes a little bit more punches than he used to. If you look at some of the stats, he was taking 40% of his opponent's power punches through his career, except in the last 5 fights. And in the last 5, BC, it's only been 29%. So he's got something of a brawler's mentality with a technician's slickness. Aggressive, can find openings, can create openings, much better now about his defense. He's got not merely the talent to succeed at super middleweight, but I think you would agree he's got the sort of the physicality there. He's got the brains. He has a lot to handle with that pressure game and all of the other sort of characteristics mixed in.
Yeah, look, that's the best stat you laid out there. His last 5 fights in which he dramatically stepped up in competition, he's gotten more efficient. He's gotten better at defense. And I talked to him about that this week on CBS Sports, and I said, look, when you employ an offensive style that fun, you're going to get hit. It's just natural. Are you worried at all about taking too much punishment? And I loved his answer, Luke. He basically said, I don't come out of these fights with cuts or black eyes or taking heavy damage. What I do on the inside is sophisticated and slick. You may not realize it in the moment that these punches that are coming back are hitting my gloves, but he's a guy who's been able to be responsible enough on defense to not become just a brawler, to have that skill set. And you identified one other thing. How rare is it in the modern day age to have that old school mentality of fighting on the inside, to be able to land multi-punch combinations when there's no space at all and go to the body effectively, which has quickly become Benavidez' calling card. This man is a technician. He can go in there against boxers. He can go in there against brawlers, and he has an opportunity to become a star in this sport as a Mexican-American front runner and face of what we're doing in boxing.
And very quickly, if we can, because I do want to talk about his opponent here in just a moment, but last thing I would say is, if you look at some of Benavidez' comments from his most important win over Anthony Durrell, why was that win so valuable to him? A lot of different reasons, but the one thing he sort of articulated after the fight, BC, was that he needed to prove he could do this against a veteran that everybody knew. It's nice to beat talented guys. It's nice to beat guys you're supposed to beat on the come up, but what about a known commodity, a championship level commodity? How well can you do as a 21, 22, now 23-year-old against someone like Durrell? It turned out, BC, pretty dang well.
Yeah, look, that fight was stopped on cuts late, but Benavidez will tell you himself, cut or no cut, that fight was getting closer to being stopped just for the punishment he was able to deliver after making adjustments. And that's why that win was so big for him. It wasn't just a co-main event on a pay-per-view. It wasn't just a chance to fight the toughest man to date on his resume and one of the division's best over the last decade. Durrell is a smart fighter. He's efficient. Yes, he can hit you with bombs, but he's a counterpuncher and a boxer. And for Benavidez to be able to walk him down, yet make the right adjustments and show you the potential that he did in that fight, he's put a lot of people at 168 on notice, and he believes that victory was a message sent to everyone else out there, all the other champions, all the other big names, that he's for real.
Now, on the other side, he'll have to face Alexis Angulo from Colombia, much older, 36 years of age, has a good record, and is coming off of that Anthony Sims Jr. upset previously, which was, I think, caught some people, including Sims and his team, probably by surprise. Brian, what can you say about Angulo? I think it'd be fair to argue he does not have sort of the slickness, the technicality, certainly some of the physical leverages with the length and the height, as you articulated, that Benavidez does. But he is also, if you saw that in the Sims fight, a bit of a come-forward guy. He does have heavy punches. To that point, even Benavidez saying this week, I'm not sleeping on him. I know he's heavy-handed. What is Benavidez, in your mind, up against with someone like Angulo?
You know, on the surface, he's a puncher. He can be a brawler if he needs to. He can be a little crude at times. And you may think 36 years old, he's shop-worn. No, he's coming into his career right now in terms of finding out how great he can be. Went to the title level a couple years back, lost to Gilberto Ramirez, learned a lot in that situation, was basically blanked over 12 rounds. The craft and adjustments that he has made to his game under trainer Pedro Diaz have been interesting. We know Pedro Diaz, the Cuban wizard genius, who's worked with guys like Guillermo Rigondeaux or taken Miguel Cotto when he had that more defensive style as a junior middleweight. He's been working with Angulo to develop that craft. And if you can take one thing away from that upset split decision win over Sims, a bright prospect in England in January, it was the fact that there weren't a lot of punches thrown in there. And I think that's certainly Angulo's power, which can discipline you and make you think twice. But there's also little subtle things he does well that may be unorthodox on the surface, but help him. And that's what makes ultimately, Luke, this matchup so interesting. For Benavidez to do what he does best, he has to walk into the kitchen of where Angulo thrives and not just survives. He's a big puncher. He's got a nice counter right hand, and we may be able to see that in action.
Let's talk now, if we can, and move on to the co-main event, a heavyweight contest between Travis Kaufman and Otto Wallin. Let's start with Otto Wallin. Now, you spoke to him as well. First of all, a bit of a note here. Both of these guys, COVID survivors, it should be observed. But first, Wallin, he has given Tyson Fury the toughest fight that he has had really in a long time. What can you say about Wallin? What did he show in that fight, surprising many people? We're talking Otto Wallin. We're sorry, we're having a bit of an issue here technically. We're trying to get it resolved here. I don't know if, Brian, if you can hear me. We're trying to figure this out. We want to talk about Otto Wallin, who is taking on Travis Kaufman. Otto Wallin, by the way, a bit of a long layoff for him, 360-plus days. Kaufman, even worse, with a 20-month layoff, and obviously he is the older of the two. Also, it should be noted, for the third time in 4 fights, Kaufman will be taking on a southpaw in Wallin. We're trying to get Brian back on Zoom. I don't think he is there. We'll get him here in just a moment. By the way, just as a note of clarification, we are set to go live with the weigh-ins right at 11 a.m. So in roughly 2 minutes and some change, we will throw to it right at that moment. But right now we're talking about the co-main event between Wallin and Kaufman. This is one where if you look at the numbers, if you just sort of look at how they match up, and really if you just look at their last performances, or I should say, how did Wallin perform against Tyson Fury even though he lost? How did Kaufman perform against Ortiz even though he lost? And what you begin to see is this is a situation where Wallin should, and boxing can be unpredictable, but should shine. He appears to be very capable as an inside fighter. He has actually excellent use of his jab when he needs it. He can set a lot of work up behind it. Certainly went into the Tyson Fury fight unintimidated. I think outlanded Tyson Fury for the first 3 rounds, certainly causing that deep, deep gash over the right eye. And there's a lot of debate about that. That cut was bad enough where you wondered, depending on the athletic commission, if that was in a different state, could that fight have been stopped? And that would have sort of derailed all the plans for the Wilder rematch and everything else. It didn't come to that. But still, the point being is Wallin, even in a losing effort, absolutely putting it on Tyson Fury. And while Fury sort of rebounded rounds, let's say 5 through 11, even in round 12, you had Wallin really going after him. Putting it on Fury, trying to end the fight strong, really shows you, A, what kind of grit and determination he has, his skill, and I think this is going to be important, he has great cardio. There have been issues previously with Kaufman trying to deal with some of this, where getting past, I think, the 6th round, he's only done around 8 times or so, and not necessarily looking the best when he has. So you have a situation now where Wallin, like I mentioned, from a skill standpoint, he should do well. I think from a sort of a measurement and how they match up with tail of the tape, he should look good. From a historical perspective and how they performed against other elite talent, he lines up well, and I think has the cardio to push this late. Now, I want to make sure I get this in. We will talk about this when the weigh-ins are complete. We also have a vacant WBA interim lightweight title. Rolando Romero taking on Jackson Marinez, a 135-pound contest. We will talk about that following the weigh-ins. They are set to start here in just a moment. If you are joining us right now, my name is Luke Thomas. We are joined by Brian Campbell on some capacity. going through some technical difficulties. We'll get them ironed out. But Showtime Championship Boxing back at the Mohegan Sun for another round. Triple header. Benavidez, Angulo, Wallin and Kaufman. And I apologize. And now Romero taking on Marinez. All right. So the weigh-ins should start here in just a moment if they can. We will take you to them. 2 titles up for grabs. The WBC super middleweight title of one Benavidez. And then, as I mentioned, the vacant WBA interim lightweight title of Romero and Marinez. All right, so we are waiting to see what the situation is with that as well. We should get going here pretty soon. Now, by the way, it should be noted, these are going to be unusual weigh-ins. If you have not seen them, we are in the COVID era, the pandemic, the COVID protocol. And so we are trying to figure out what is the best way to deal with that. Commissions have come up with certainly a bubble-like atmosphere. Bellator MMA on the MMA side, who shares the resources with Showtime, they call that inside space the fight sphere. Nevertheless, a lot of masks going on. It may take a little bit longer. I still think it will run efficiently, but it may take a little bit longer to get things going, because I think there is a sanitization process between the fighters weighing in on the scale. There's a lot that has to go into this to make sure that, better safe than sorry. Certainly there is a quarantining process. Certainly there is a testing protocol that goes into place as well to ensure that no one gets this disease transmitted. But then on top of it, there is also this sort of, I would not call it hygiene theater. I would call it certainly an important component to keeping everybody safe here and making sure that these fights can go forward. We're actually quite lucky that the bubble experiment and the bubble model works really well for combat sports, and certainly works really well for some other major sports entities. I believe we are going to get Brian Campbell back here in just a moment. I do not know what happened. As I mentioned before, my name is Luke Thomas. Brian Campbell, well, is my co-host. We are the hosts of Morning Kombat. You can check us out, Morning Kombat with a K. We have our own channel here for Showtime Championship Boxing, getting ready for the weigh-ins. And I believe they are starting here in just a moment. Brian, can you hear me? Are you back now?
Welcome to the Mohegan Sun Arena as Premier Boxing Champions presents our official weigh-in for tomorrow's exciting night.
I believe they are starting the weigh-ins. If we want to go to them now, why don't we do that? We'll go to the Benavidez Angulo weigh-ins live from the Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut.
We will get going with our first weigh-in. It will be 8 rounds in the super middleweight division. First up to the stage, out of the red corner, fighting out of Accra, Ghana, with 27 victories, including 18 by knockout, opposite of 1 defeat and 1 draw. Presenting Habib Wild Hurricane Ahmed. $166.4 for Ahmed. And now his opponent out of the blue corner with a record of 26 victories, 12 coming by way of KO, opposite of just 2 defeats. Fighting out of Forestville, Maryland, presenting Alantes Sly Aza Fox. $169.6 for Fox. This bout will be 8 rounds in the super middleweight division. Once again, Habib Wild Hurricane Ahmed taking on Alantes Sly Aza Fox.
Brian, let's sort of get to this if we can while the weigh-ins are happening. As you can see here, the fighters are being asked to have face-offs with 6 feet of distance, I suppose, per CDC protocol. We were talking very quickly, if we can, while we wait for the rest of the fights to weigh in, about the co-main event between Otto Wallin and Travis Kaufman. As you can see here, by the way, very quickly, there's the sanitization process that has to go down between the fights. Brian, if you can, very quickly, your thoughts on Wallin and Kaufman.
Look, it's an opportunity for Otto Wallin to really let us know who he is, Luke. And that close-up we got against him when he fought Tyson Fury last year for the heavyweight championship was as close as you can come to pulling the upset, opening that big cut against Fury, and really announcing himself. Was that one great night at the office, or is this 6'5.5" heavyweight from Sweden legitimately a top 10 and eventual maybe top 5 contender? He's going to have that opportunity against a rugged veteran in Travis Kaufman, who at the very least is going to be there for rounds. He is a tough out. He can box. He can do some things. But for Wallin, he's got so much bright potential. And I think if there's one great thing he showed against Tyson Fury, maybe a little bit of a mean streak, which is such a coincidence, Luke. I don't know if you've ever talked to him, but Otto Wallin may be the nicest, most polite boxer in this game. Yet you saw him in the ring. I asked him straight up, when Tyson Fury's cut opened up, did you dip the glove in there? Did you try to make it worse? Did you try to do whatever it took to win a championship? He said, I'm not proud of it, but I had to show him that I wasn't afraid. That, at the very least, is the intangibles of what makes a title contender.
The next fight to weigh in will be the opener of the Showtime telecast. Rolando Romero taking on Jackson Marinez. As we talked about it before, a weird situation kind of with the WBA lightweight, right? Let's see if I got this right. They've got a super champ, they've got the world champ, they've got the gold champ, and this will be for the interim champ at lightweight. A lot to unpack there, but first, just the fight. Romero, a guy out of Mayweather's camp, looks like he is the real deal Holyfield, so to speak, taking on Jackson Marinez. What do you make of this matchup?
Well, look, whether or not Rolly Romero actually is the real deal, the best part about him is he believes he is, without a doubt. We know he's a fighter that was handpicked and promoted by Floyd Mayweather, unbeaten at 11-0. He's facing a very interesting out in Marinez, who's unbeaten himself, but is much more of a slick boxer to Romero as the puncher. And Romero had said so many big things this week. The chutzpah, the machismo was out. He thinks all the big names at 135, Luke, are avoiding him. And he also made this prediction, and I want to get the quote right, that his knockout of Marinez this weekend will be very brutal and one of the worst the sport has ever seen. I'll have what he's having in terms of believing in your power. He's going to have an opportunity Saturday night to show us that.
A little bit more than that, Romero's an interesting fighter, right? Because he is all action, offense all the time. To the point where, yes, he'll get stoppages, but it allows opponents... Oh, here we go. Let's go to the scales here. These are the weigh-ins for, I believe, the... Actually, I think they're having the weigh-ins for the Wallin and Kaufman fight. Let's go to the weigh-in. Let's hear the stream here, please.
This bout will be opening up the broadcast tomorrow live on Showtime at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. 10 rounds in the heavyweight division. Travis My Time Kaufman taking on Otto All-In Wallin.
So a bit of a correction. Let me make clear on this. The Romero and Marinez fight, that will be your co-main event. The opener will be the only non-title fight on the card between Wallin and Kaufman there. You saw something interesting there. Wallin, he's tall. He's lanky. He actually has some real leverage, so to speak, on Kaufman. What do you make of Kaufman? We talked about Wallin. What is Kaufman up against in terms of what he can bring? We know, like, Wallin, a bit more of a known commodity, and certainly Kaufman to that extent, too, actually older than Wallin, but he has an opportunity here in terms of matchups. 3 southpaws in his last 4 fights. What can he bring to the table?
Well, look, what Wallin does best what he's best known for is his footwork and his hand speed. Yeah, he showed a little bit more of the ruggedness and the power, but that's the biggest challenge facing Kaufman. Does he have the speed to be able to keep up with a, let's say, younger, fresher fighter in Otto Wallin, who maybe has a brighter long-term picture in this division? We've seen Kaufman step up against the very West. He went rounds against Luis Ortiz, and I mentioned he is tough. But one thing Travis Kaufman will have going for him is inspiration, Luke. We've all in the boxing game have been touched by the loss of legendary trainer, brother Nassim Richardson. Richardson has served as lead trainer, co-trainer, or just Philly mentor to Travis Kaufman for years. This obviously caught him off guard. He's dedicating this fight. He's going to have his father, Marshall, in his corner. They've been longtime friends with Nazim Richardson. That could play a factor in terms of his motivation, but he's really going to have to be able to keep up with Wallin and hurt him early to try to discipline him and try to make this more of a fight on his terms. That's why you see Otto Wallin as the favorite, because of those skills.
And just to give everyone the clarification here, because I did not hear the numbers, but we will share them just the same. Otto Wallin weighing in at 241.3/4, or I should say 241 and 3/4 pound, and then Kaufman 234 and 1/4 pound. I got to tell you, BC, I'm a little bit more of a fan personally of the old school scales rather than the new digital ones, because it allows you to fudge it just a little bit, which means there's fewer fights canceled on balance over time. But as you can see there, Wallin, the bigger guy, the taller guy, I believe he has a greater reach as well. It's going to be an interesting contest. Now, this takes us to our co-main event, the vacant WBA interim lightweight title. Let's go to the feed.
135 on the dot, 135 for Marinez. And now his opponent, his record unblemished, 11 victories, including 10 coming by way of knockout. Fighting out of Las Vegas, Nevada, the number 10 ranked WBA lightweight, the hard-hitting Rolando Rolly Romero. 134.8 for Romero, 134.8.
So we have 135 for Marinez, and we have 134.84 for Rolando Romero. No face-off?
How about that for social distancing? I'd like to see a little. Here we go. Here we go, Luke.
There we go.
This will be our
no shortage of confidence, as we mentioned, in Romero, but Marinez has said all the right things this week in terms of how he thinks he's going to match up against him.
And also, if there is one advantage, you would agree with this. It's not really, actually, it's quite indisputable. Marinez has experience going longer in fights. He has had the opportunity to really sort of push it past the normal parameters that Romero typically finds himself in.
Yeah, Romero knows the stigma against a guy like him with only 11 fights. You haven't gone the 12-round distance. You haven't been tested in the deep waters. I like what he said. I don't train to try to go there. I try to knock you out. But he did mention going 15 rounds in sparring. He's confident in his ability, in his intangibles, should it get there. But that's really Marinez's opportunity to use those boxing skills. Use Robert Garcia in his corner. Luke, Marinez of Dominican background, he said he loved the Mexican style he's learning in the past year from Robert Garcia, obviously one of the best trainers in the game today, maybe to improve that offensive outburst. But slickness is his calling card, and you're going to have that real old school sort of classic matchup of boxer versus puncher, bull versus matador. You just better believe that Rolly Romero, that bull, he's coming to end this fight early.
And I want to be clear about some of the numbers here. Both guys in their 20s, Romero the younger of the two, 24 to 29. The key here is they both are undefeated, which I really like. The thing that stands out is the KO percentage, 90.9%, 90.9% for Romero, 36.8% for Marinez. And you might say to yourself, 36.8%, that's not very good. It should be sort of known, sometimes you can come from a nation where the boxing game is not as developed, and a lot of times you will get fighters that are not as credentialed, ends up padding your record. That is not the case with Marinez coming from the Dominican Republic. He has fought really tough guys with winning percentages all the way through, which maybe he isn't quite the power puncher and the offensive dynamo that Romero is, but that 36.8 BC, it shouldn't fool you into thinking, well, this is just a guy that has to ride it out the whole time. He's been fighting pretty tough guys in ways that a lot of times someone from his background may not necessarily face them in that same way.
You know, that's where his advantage and experience could play a factor. And, you know, one thing he said is Romero's overconfidence is going to play against him just as much of his experience will. And look, when you're a puncher, sometimes you have to grow to become one. Sometimes you grow into your man strength. Sometimes you learn that over time. We know Romero, a natural puncher. Marinez, more of a boxer at his core.
All right, so here we are going to have the weigh-ins now for the main event. David Benavidez taking on Alexis Angulo of Colombia. Let's see how this goes. Let's go to the feed here if we can. This is Angulo, who's wearing gloves, by the way.
$167.6 for the challenger Angulo.
167.6 you heard there
his
for
opponent coming
Alexis
to the stage.
Angulo, the challenger.
His record undefeated, 22 victories, including 19 coming by way of knockout. Fighting out of Phoenix, Arizona, presenting the reigning and defending WBC Super Middleweight Champion, David El Bandera Rojo Benavidez. 170.8 for Benavidez. 170.8.
Wow.
Wow. Wait a second here, BC. Okay, just to recap, this is your main event. Angulo coming in 167.6. Here is the face-off between
Ladies
them.
and gentlemen,
The limit is 168. Benavidez coming in at 170.8 with no 1 pound allowance. So let me see if I can. This is news to us. So let me see if I can make sense of this. This means, if I'm understanding this correctly, BC, Benavidez has missed weight. I think he just lost the title on the scales.
Yeah, typically you're allotted, a time, whether it be an hour, depending on the state commission, to get that second chance. He may have that opportunity. He may decline that depending on where his body is, but he will not have a chance to fight for that title that he's holding, the green belt, the WBC, if he doesn't get under that 168-pound limit.
Right, so I guess we'll see what the situation is. We'll clarify with that if he's going to additionally cut weight. At a bare minimum, Angulo should, I'm trying to remember the rules here, Angulo should be qualified to fight for this belt no matter what happens with Benavidez, whether or not he qualifies. So he at least will have the opportunity. I guess it remains to be seen. Wow, what do you make of this? I don't recall Benavidez missing weight previously. He's had some other indiscretions outside of the ring, which ones he was able to come back from, but I don't recall weight being an issue. What do you, I mean, I will have to talk to him to get more of this, but what do you attribute that to?
I mean, look, he's a young fighter who's, growing into himself. Let's not forget, he also used to fight as high as 250 pounds as a teenager, becoming an amateur boxer at age 13, turning pro at age 16, as we mentioned. But it's unprecedented times right now, and I don't say that as a potential excuse. I just say that as a reality. Whether we're covering mixed martial arts or boxing, you don't know how people are going to react to these adjusted training camps, to just taking the normal and making it the abnormal in terms of your nutrition, your time with your trainers, and all that. We've seen in UFC fighters actually training over Zoom. We've seen a lot of different things. We know Benavidez, born and raised in Phoenix, recently moved to Seattle. A lot of changes in certainly his life. This is a long layoff for him, and he's going to have that chance to get under that limit, but that's a tough blow off the first time on the scale, 2 pounds over.
Still, and you never really know when these guys talk to the media. It's like, how honest are they truly being? But it is worth noting, Benavidez this week saying he had moved to Seattle and everything was good. He was able to focus. He had a private training scenario that he was able to bring in sparring partners and be very careful about it. In other words, that, yes, the pandemic might have interrupted the normal flow of things, but it did not really interrupt his ability to get ready for this contest. That is interesting. Now, we are set to be joined... It should be noted, we are set to be joined by Benavidez, which, if that is the case, BC, I don't know if he's going to use the extra hour or not to make the weight. But by the way, if you're off by, let's see, the limit being 168, so 169, 70, 171, 2.5 pounds, that sometimes can be doable, especially the heavier you get, to get that off in an hour if it's possible. But also, that could drain you, and it's better to take the W than the L, even if the title is on the line.
Yeah, he could still win this fight on Saturday night, and lose his title right here if he doesn't get under the limit. And look, it's a tough setback for a fighter who worked so hard to come back from originally being stripped of his WBC title for recreational drug use. He said all the right things afterwards, did all the right things physically and professionally, and as we mentioned, looked great last year against Anthony Durrell in that pay-per-view co-main event to win back his title. To lose it a second time would be a tough blow. We'll see what happens in this. It's a fluid situation, to say the very least, Luke.
Does this, in your mind, change the calculation for how much Angulo has a chance?
Certainly, because we've seen it go obviously both ways when it comes to, let's say, we're projecting here, we're not sure what's going to happen in the next few minutes, but ultimately should Benavidez not make the weight, sometimes that can be an advantage when you're not forcing yourself in that last few, in that final hour to cut down and to really go into a dark place where your body can just go no more. Other times it can be a disadvantage. I'd have to think overall it's probably more of an advantage, but you're always going to see that play out in different ways.
This is an interesting moment in the 23-year-old life of Benavidez, right? Because if you test positive for some kind of a drug, to me, I don't really think there's any discussion about it if it is recreational and it happens in a window outside of direct competition, which is basically what had happened to him. He still was punished for it, which to me, you start turning into vice cops with athletic commissions. Let's put a pin in that conversation. We'll come back. And we are joined now by Mr. Benavidez. He is there at the weigh-ins, ready to speak to us. Hi, David. How are you?
Man, I'm, very disappointed. Obviously it's my first time missing weight. I'm just, like I said, very disappointed, losing the title on the scale, but I still got a job to do tomorrow. I'd lose the title, but I'm still going to win the fight tomorrow.
Yeah, just to clarify, I do believe this means you lost the title from the scale. Can you tell us, from your vantage point, what exactly happened that caused you to miss weight?
Maybe, I put the blame on myself. There's nothing that could have, the last 3 pounds wouldn't come off. Maybe, not having the proper things I need, maybe sauna. I was only able to go to the gym, for an hour a day here, since I've got here. It's just a couple of different things, but, obviously I'm very disappointed in, stuff that's happening right now, but I still got a good job to do tomorrow. I'm definitely get another opportunity, later in the future, but tomorrow I still got a fight to win.
David, obviously this is a tough setback to face and something you certainly didn't plan. How do you think that will affect your mindset when you go in the ring? You're fighting to keep your unbeaten record. You're not fighting to win back that title that you worked so hard in the past year plus to get. Do you expect any sort of extra motivation or maybe a personal challenge in that?
Definitely. I'm definitely 100 times angrier. I'm coming into this fight. I don't have my belt no more, So the only thing I could get out of this fight is winning, That's the ultimate motivation right now. I'm still looking to come in strong, and put up a good fight. Like I said, I was going to put up a good fight for all the fans, and that's what I'm looking to do.
Did you give any consideration to making a second effort to cut off the extra weight, or was it too much for your body?
I was trying all morning last night. I just got to those 3 pounds where it just, I worked out for an hour literally and nothing came off. It was dry as a bone. And I just had to think about, there's nothing else I could do. If you move around for an hour, I had sauna suits working out. Maybe if I would have had a big bathtub, just laid in the bathtub for an hour, but I wasn't able to access that either. No sauna, And then just when the body, feels like I couldn't sweat anymore, So there's just nothing I could do there.
David, as long as fights are taking place in the pandemic, does this experience change the way you might prep your weight going forward?
Definitely. I didn't think this all the way through, Coming in, I thought I was going to have access to more, but unfortunately I didn't. It's just maybe a message to all the other fighters, have a little bit of trouble with their weights, it's going to be hard to making a weight if you already have trouble making weight. We're only allowed access to the gym 1 time a day. No saunas, nothing like that. So if you need a couple extra things, it's you should probably make the weight before you get to the wherever you're going, where the bubble, wherever it is. It's because it's very hard.
Obviously, David. Sorry, BC. One more, if I can. Obviously, David, you don't want to look past your opponent Angulo on Saturday, but losing the title this way, to what extent does that change some of your plans for 2020?
Yeah, it changes all of them. Yeah, it absolutely changes all of them. So, for 2020, the only thing I got to look forward to is this fight. I still, the way this outcome of this fight, I might still be able to get a fight by the end of the year. But, this is probably the biggest fight I have until the end of the year. So, I'm definitely looking to do my best, and have a great performance still.
David, you have an opportunity to stand across from Alexis Angulo today, opportunity to see him around the bubble, so to speak. What'd you take from those, looking into his eyes?
It's the same thing. It's a fight, He wants to win the fight, He has the opportunity to win the belt. but I'm just looking at him, it's going to be a very brutal fight tomorrow, I already lost the belt, so the thing I can get out this fight, is getting a good KO or giving an amazing fight, so that's what I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
There's an interesting element, David, of this matchup where the things that you do well also play into what he does. He sits back, he's a heavy counterpuncher, he can throw hands. Is there any sort of fear would be the wrong word, but pause in making this an all-action brawl, knowing that he does have some legitimate firepower?
We're still going to follow the game plan, just because I have extra motivation to win the fight, or, it doesn't mean I'm just going to go in there reckless. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to go in there reckless. I still got to be patient. At the end of the day, this is a fight. He has good punching power, but I do as well, we're still going to stay patient. The game plan follows, as if everything, is good, So we're stick to the game plan, but we're definitely going to make this into a great fight.
David, we know you got to run, so we appreciate your time, appreciate your candor. Looking forward to seeing you compete tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
There he is, David Benavidez. Now, I believe I have to clarify it as the former WBC super middleweight champion. You heard him there, BC. You asked the question, I think the correct one. Are you going to try to make a move to get that extra few pounds off? Some fighters do, some fighters don't. He was saying no. He just couldn't get the sweat off. Now, every time a fighter misses weight, it's never good. I think we can all agree with that. But you do have to have, I think, in the pandemic era, a little bit more sympathy than normal. And the reason why is the ones he articulated. We are not dealing with normal circumstances. Now, maybe the fighters should be better prepared. It sounds like the learning experience Benavidez will have for future fights, as long as the pandemic is going on, will inform that judgment. Okay, fair enough. But at the same time, if you're used to a certain procedure and now you can only go to the gym once a day and there is no sauna, yes, it is upon you to plan for those things. But that is a change, and it obviously had some kind of an impact here.
Well, Luke, ultimately, from an entertainment factor, you heard the motivation that he has out there to sort of redeem any way he can. He can't win his title against Angulo on Saturday, but he certainly can prevent his opponent from doing that. And some point, your body does shut down, whether you've had an ideal training camp or sometimes your body just gives way to a certain weight class. Let's remember, although he turned pro at age 16, he's still just 23. He's still, in some ways growing, both physically and obviously mentally. This will be a tough setback, but if we saw him, how he responded to the last tough setback when a personal error originally cost him his WBC title, he came back as focused as ever. And Luke, I think you'll agree, he came back nastier in the ring. We may have identified that, he ain't just a plain brawler. He's a crafty guy who can throw a lot of punches, but he has what you call a mean streak in there that's not only fun to watch, but I think that may end up separating him from his foes in this division. He's going to have to prove that. He's going to have to win back his title, even obviously after Saturday night. But I think he has the goods underneath it all to do just that. But look, personal challenges hit us all.
And I wonder how he'll be covered by all of this in the media. I mean, listen, it is your responsibility to make weight. It is not your coaches. It is not the promoters. It is not the television networks. It is strictly upon you to do that. It should be noted. Nevertheless, to have the kind of setback which I was articulating prior to the interview with David, which was, he wasn't testing positive for PEDs. He tested positive for a recreational drug. And I'm not here to undermine the seriousness of that, but I'm not here to overstate it either. And so to your point, he came back strongly from that. But at 23, you're still trying to figure out life and how you balance your own things you want to do outside of the ring and how much fun you actually want to have. I tend to think he might get beaten up a little bit for this, not so much by Angulo, but by the media a little bit, and maybe some of that is deserved. Still, I don't think there should be too heavy a stick because of the reasons we previously articulated related to what he had actually tested positive for. And now this, not great, but it is the pandemic. So I think in the end, it will probably, let's say, fast track some of the maturity that maybe needs to be there. Not that he's immature per se, but for the level of the game that he wants to occupy, no stone can be left unturned. And it's an unforgiving side of the sport, but if that's the one you sign up for, that's the reality that ends up being there.
Let me give you a final note on that. You asked an interesting question to me, which is true. How would this affect him physically? Could that potentially give Angulo certain advantages that maybe weren't there to begin with? I think it's the same question you have to ask. What's inside of him? He's come back before from setbacks mentally 24 hours after this, plus after this weigh-in debacle. Can he be of the right mindset Saturday night? Certainly something to watch out for one of the toughest, both physically and mentally, fighters we've seen at this young age.
One more question about this, if I may, to you, which is he looks like he said he's sticking to the game plan, but as you heard, he is disappointed. It's not a great look for what has happened today, however forgiving you would like to be about it or not. Still, let me ask you this, BC. To what extent is an emphatic KO, let's say, inside of 6 against a guy who is this tough? How redemptive is that for the public, for his stardom, for the path that he admitted for 2020 has been somewhat derailed?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And let's be honest, he may be in need of that to kind of quell some of the responses critically against him that he'll get for what was, look, another setback in terms of not making weight here. Maybe he'll have to double down in that regard to prove people wrong. But he's a fighter with, as we mentioned, the kind of fighting spirit inside where naturally he wants to do that anyway. If he can get a victory, which he's the favorite to do so, although this has all the potential to be an action and tough fight, if he can do that emphatically, that's going to have to be the best he can take home from a moral victory, so to speak. He's not going to leave with that green belt, but he's certainly going to leave with big opportunities to come if he can focus on the task at hand and make a loud statement.
And then lastly, I would say I know that there are probably people watching who are not going to give Angulo much of a chance, and I'm not here to lobby necessarily for that possibility, but you at least have to take it seriously. They are going to be in a ring. It is a fist fight. Many things can happen. I have to say, if Angulo were somehow able to get his hand raised here, that would be calamitous probably for Benavidez when you add in the weight cut failure, and it would be transformative of the career of Angulo, would it not?
It would. It adds more suspense and more meaning for Saturday night's fight, but it also gives Angulo a big opportunity to make a statement that he's a player in this division, which has a lot of big names, has a lot of fun names at the moment. When you look across the other champions, the Caleb Plants, the Billy Joe Saunders, etc., there's a lot of fun names and big fights we want to see. Angulo can jump into that with a big win. And from the standpoint of how can Angulo use what happened at today's weigh-in to his advantage, look, we said it. You want to get into a brawl, that's the best fight Angulo can win as a big power puncher. If Benavidez has more to prove, it's going to be up to him to do so and prove that responsibly. You can get emotional in there, Luke, depending on what kind of pressures you take in with you. For Angulo, he'd have to hope that can play into his hands, and he can make this fight on his terms. And that's going to be making Benavidez do what he doesn't do. He throws punches and bunches. If you can make him have to slow down by landing big shots early, that has to be Angulo's plan to have some success in this fight.
And you mentioned it, so I'll bring it up here. Caleb Plant. Obviously, you heard we just had Benavidez on saying his 2020 plans were kind of derailed. Now, he had a mandatory that he had to get to at some point outside of this contest, but it was thought you do that, and that's when some of those fights you had articulated begin to happen. Now, where are we? Assuming he gets a win, and maybe he won't, but let's assume Benavidez gets a win. Where are we for some of these bigger fights that, like against a Caleb Plant that you were mentioning before?
Well, there's certainly, this delays that. There's going to have to be another step in between. There was already, with what you mentioned, the mandatory contender in the WBC, Avni Yildirim of Turkey. This is a guy who looked really good in pushing Anthony Durrell for their vacant WBC title bout in the fight before Durrell lost to Benavidez and ultimately lost that fight due to cuts, was Yildirim. He's a tough out. I'm not sure what's going to happen if Benavidez wins on Saturday in terms of who will fight for that vacant title. But at the very least, the idea of what could be a big money fight in this division is an incredible style matchup in this division, and is also, Luke, a bit of a soap opera, is the fact that David Benavidez and IBF champion Caleb Plant do not like each other. They are the bull and matador in this division, both stylistically and in terms of how they see each other. I want that fight. Everybody wants that fight. Benavidez wants that fight. Maybe we wait a little bit longer, but I feel like those are two trains, Luke, that unless something derails them, they will collide.
And I don't have the opportunity as we speak to look at social media, but I suspect Mr. Plant might have a thing or two to say about some of the realities of today's weigh-in events. So that'll be something to pay attention to as we go forward. Of course, that will be our headlining fight. The WBC super middleweight title is up for grabs, but only for Alexis Angulo. If you're just joining us, David Benavidez has missed weight. He came in at 170.8 pounds, so he lost his title on the scales. There will be one fighter who can get it. Even if Benavidez wins, he does not get the opportunity to capture, although I suspect if he does, there will be an opportunity going forward to do that at a later date. Our co-main event, I want to make sure we spend a little bit more time talking about it, the Romero-Marinez fight, the vacant interim WBA lightweight title. A lot of lightweight titles there for the WBA with the Super Gold World and now interim, I believe. Where does this one rank among the other lightweight WBA titles?
Well, look, this is more of an entrance into that mold and that mix of the people that we look at as the faces of the lightweight division and the big names. You've heard Rolly Romero saying they're all scared of me. I'm trying to enter into that conversation and they won't let me. Well, look, if Romero continues on the path he's gone down, 11-0, age 24, big-time knockouts, making some statements, this will certainly kick that door open, Luke, and get him into there. You're talking about big names at 135. You're looking at guys like Devin Haney. You're looking at guys like Ryan Garcia, Vasily Lomachenko, on and on across there, Teofimo Lopez. It's one of the most, let's say, loaded divisions for youth and stars of potentially of tomorrow. There's a big opportunity for Rolly Romero to prove that he's of that ilk. But at the same time, Luke, I think if you look at the three matchups on this strong triple header Saturday night on Showtime, 9 p.m. Eastern is the start. Marinez may have the best chance of pulling the upset just because of how the style matchup breaks down and the gap in experience between the two.
Interesting. And also, it should be noted, Romero has the Mayweather rub. He is a guy that Mayweather has backed. What does that signify? What does that mean in the world of boxing that Mayweather has sort of given you? It's more than just his blessing, of course. There's a more professional relationship. But when Mayweather gets behind you, obviously he sees something that by itself is no guarantee of success, but it certainly carries some kind of weight. In your mind, what is that?
Well, look, you obviously have to be the goods. You have to be the talent to have that Mayweather stamp take you places. But obviously, you get that stamp. That means that you are looked at as somebody who has a giant future ahead of you, bright potential, all the sort of intangibles that a guy like Floyd Mayweather, a legend and an all-timer, looks in himself and looks in other fighters. He's putting that stamp before on guys. Hey, Gervonta Tank Davis, anyone? And we've seen the leaps that he has made in such a short time. This is that opportunity for Romero to continue to do that. But when you get a power promoter in the game, somebody with that influence, and also, again, somebody with that keen eye, somebody with that type of IQ, believing in you in this way, it must mean that your future is bright. It's up to you, obviously, to take those opportunities and prove Mr. Mayweather correct.
It's a great opportunity. I think you would agree, lastly, on this for Romero. This is a guy who is fighting somebody who, doesn't have on paper or really even on the screen. He doesn't jump out at you necessarily to have some of the same excitement or skill per se that Romero does, but he does have experience. He has gone deeper into contests. And for somebody like Romero who has this all action come forward, take a couple of risks along the way style, this is a good opportunity to grow into it, refine it, maybe take a few less risks and still find ways to keep your offense meaningful, active, and in the face of your opponent.
Yeah, Romero, he's going to do what he does, which is try to get you out of there. The best questions that can be answered, though, is if he has issues doing that. If Marinez doesn't put himself in positions for that, and this becomes a little bit more of a chess match. We haven't had to see that out of Rolly Romero through 11 fights. I want to know what's under that hood, so to speak. I'm sure as much as he as the fighter does, he can show a lot of things in training camp and sparring, but you got to do it on the brightest stage. Marinez could be, Luke, that fighter, if he can control distance, if he can set the pace here, get in and get out without getting hurt. This could be an interesting fight as those rounds go on.
And then last but certainly not least, well, I should say the opener, actually, excuse me, of the Showtime triple header tomorrow is the heavyweight contest. Otto Wallin, who has been off for, I think, 366 days, taking on Travis Kaufman, 20 months. And Travis Kaufman, the older of the two. Now, part of that layoff makes sense because, we're in the middle of a pandemic, a lot of timelines. In fact, many of the fights on this card were supposed to take place in April, and they just got pushed kind of late. So that's a big component here. But 20 months for Kaufman, that is very long. Sometimes fighters need rest because they're beaten up, and that's okay. But sometimes a little too much rest leads to a little bit of rust. Where do you think we are in the balance of that with these two heavyweights?
Well, look, we nailed the unprecedented nature of the build to this fight for every person in the quarantine and all the things that go with that, whether we're talking about Benavidez missing weight or not. In this specific heavyweight matchup, both have endured long layoffs, in part because they both were very public about their battle with COVID-19 and how they overcame that and fought through that, but obviously how much of a potential scare or delay that was in their training and their development as a fighter. I think when you look at Wallin, and this is something I talked with him about, it's not just that. He had 3 fights essentially get scheduled and fall apart in 2019 in that same sequence in which he had his biggest opportunity to date, in which he showed very well in a decision loss to Tyson Fury, opening up that big cut against the lineal champion. Look, Luke, we can all argue. If that wasn't Tyson Fury in there that night, maybe that fight gets stopped and Otto Wallin is your lineal heavyweight champion. He knows how close he came. He also knows how many hits and misses he had around that. He was on Showtime, fought Nick Kisner. The fight didn't go past 1 round. It was a no contest. He's been chomping at the bit to show how great he can be. He did that one night against Tyson Fury. Let's see if he can do it again, coming off of all those things, a long layoff, an illness, and then some. Hey, Kaufman, he'll be there. That's the one thing Travis Kaufman gives you, durability. He's a smart boxer. If he can overcome that speed disadvantage here, we can have an interesting one.
And tomorrow, everything kicks off 9 p.m. in the East on Showtime. If you do not have Showtime and you would like to try it, I've got great news for you. Go to Showtime.com right now. You can have a 30-day free trial. If you like it, you may keep it. If not, you can bounce. It's completely up to you. And of course, there's tons of great programming on Showtime in addition to tomorrow's Showtime Championship Boxing, 9 p.m. from the Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut. Brian Campbell and I, we are the hosts of Morning Kombat. You can check us out Mondays at 11 a.m., Morning Kombat with AK. We are covering MMA, we cover boxing, we cover everything in between, BC. It's a combat sports show in ways that, you know what? Like today, plenty of technical difficulties, but we make it work just the same.
We do make it work. Shout out to everybody behind the scenes here, Luke. And shout out to this fight card. Saturday night, 9 Eastern, as you mentioned. A lot of opportunities for some names to make some noise. Looking forward to see what happens inside that bubble.
Some underdogs with some big opportunities, some A-sides, some headliners that have some work cut out for them as well in many different ways. That is Brian Campbell. I'm Luke Thomas. Thank you to everyone on the broadcast, Showtime Mulca, and everyone else who watched. 9 p.m. tomorrow in the East. Triple header on Showtime. The return of Showtime Championship Boxing for the second time this month. Until then, enjoy the fights.
With no audience, no fans in attendance, you are afforded an opportunity to hear every single shot.
Have you thought about that? What's it going to be like fighting and no fans in the stands?
It's going to be a little weird, bro, to be honest, because I'm the type of fighter that feeds off the energy of the fans. I'll probably be a little bit more disciplined. I want to give a great show to the fans at home. I want to be that first big fight. At the end of the day, I feel like the safety of the people is what matters the most.
Romer Angulo, what kind of fight should we expect when you two step into the ring?
It's going to be a war, man. He's a hard puncher. Most of my fights are nothing but knockouts, too. If you hit me once, I have to hit you back twice. You know how people got with Mike Tyson. They couldn't wait to go see him. That's kind of like the route I want to take. The generation before us was Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. I want to be one of the greatest in my generation. If you mention boxing from the 2020s and up, David Benavidez has to be up there.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changed, and you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.